So let's focus on the meal detail screen for now. So the part here where we view the details of a selected recipe. Right now we just have the dummy content there of the meal detail screen, and that's of course not the content I really want to have there. Instead, what should be in there? Well, if we have a look at our meal model, it probably makes sense to have the image there. Please keep in mind that the title already is shown in our header. So it makes sense to have the image here at the top maybe, and below that, maybe just, again, repeat duration, affordability, and complexity, just as we're doing it here below our recipe. And then, also below that, list all the ingredients and the steps it takes to, well, make that dish. So that's in the end what I want to have on this page here on the meal detail screen. And therefore, I think it makes sense to first of all add a scroll view, because we'll certainly have a lot of content on there that will most likely not fit onto one screen and certainly not on all possible device sizes. So I will add a scroll view here and wrap that around my content here. Now we'll have a couple of different sections here. For example, at the very top, I want to have my image. For this, I will also import the image component from React Native here so that we can render an image here, not a background image, but a normal image. And I want to add this, let's say, here right at the top, something like that. Now, after the image, I want to have a view with the duration, affordability, and complexity, as I mentioned. So basically, the same setup we have in the meal item. This here, you could say. And therefore, I'll actually copy the view from there, and then we can adjust it as we need it here in the meal detail screen. So I'll just replace this view with the copied view. Of course, that requires us to import the default text component here. So let's add this. Let's import default text from components, default text. So that's the next row. And thereafter, I want to have my ingredients and the steps you need to execute. So we can add some text here where we say ingredients. And there I want to also apply a style, like styles text title, something like this, or just title, because I want to have some bold header here, maybe increase the font size. Below that, have my list of ingredients. So list of ingredients, and that's of course not the final content. Instead, we will render a list here. And below that, I'll repeat this here, because then I want to have a title where I say steps, and then a list of steps below that. And now I'll get rid of this old content down there, and that's what I want to work with. Now, of course, all the styles are missing, and all the props duration and so on, that doesn't yield anything. Instead, we have to work with the selected meal here, selected meal duration, selected meal complexity, selected meal affordability. And for the image, for example, I want to add a source here. Source, since it's a network image, is an object with a URI property, which points at selected meal.image URL to load this. And we also need to apply a style there to set a width and a height. So here I want to point at styles image, let's say. And all these styles are missing, as I said, so let's add that. Here for this style, I also want to say styles.details maybe, because we're displaying the details of this recipe. And let's go down to the style sheet, therefore. Remove the screen, which we don't need anymore. Instead, let's add image and details. Now for details, we need to set the flex direction to row, because that should be all the details in a row. We can add a little bit of padding in all directions, maybe of 15, and also add justify content of space around to nicely distribute our detail items here. That should be good. In addition to that, on the image here, we also need to add a style. There, the width should be 100%, let's say, to take the full available width. And for height, I'll go with 200, though of course you could dynamically calculate this with the dimensions API, for example, to always take a certain fraction of the available height, or simply play around with different values here. I'll go with that. and have a look here. And that doesn't look too shabby. That's not too bad. Now, you could definitely also try some bonus work here, some bonus tasks, and for example, color these details, simple, affordable, and the duration, depending on whether it's rather short or depending on the different values you have for simple, for the complexity and the affordability. It's not something I will do here, but you can have a look at the meal data, of course, to see which values we have there to derive what's short, what's a medium duration, what's a long duration, and to see which values are getting used for complexity and so on. And then you could actually add some if checks to apply different styling to the different values we're outputting here in the MealDetail screen for these details, so that you color the text differently depending on whether it's long or not. It's not something I'll do here because it's just some extra work that doesn't really add much to the navigation, which is the focus of this module. So instead, I'll focus on ingredients and steps. And their first step is to make sure that title here is styled properly. So let's add title to the style sheet. And in there, I'll add font family and set this to Open Sans Bold. Set the font size to 22 maybe, and set text align to center the text in the middle. And with that, if we check this looks quite nice. Now I also want to output my ingredients and my steps, of course. And for that, it's important to understand that in the dummy data, these are arrays. These are my ingredients, for example. These are my steps. And you see there's just text in these arrays. So I just want to output my text here as a list. And I'll not use a flat list because you could do that. You could have scrollable containers in there, so to say, but I will simply render the ingredients and the steps on top of each other. So here we can use a good old approach we know from vanilla React for Web 2, which I also showed earlier in the course. We can use our selected meal and there the ingredients, which is an array of strings, and map this into an array of components. That's how you can output a list of data in React and also in React Native. And often you use flat list, but here we don't need to because it's not an infinite amount, so we don't need these optimizations, and we have a wrapping scroll view around the entire screen, so we will be able to also scroll if we're outputting more than fits on the screen. So we're absolutely fine using this approach. And therefore here I will have my single ingredient in this map function, and map is a method built into JavaScript, as you know. And here we need to return a JSX element now, and what I want to return is a text component, where I simply output ingredient, because ingredients is an array of strings, so ingredient is just a string. And then here we also need to supply a key. That's a requirement by React. And we can use ingredient as a key because we'll always have each ingredient only once. So that is guaranteed to be unique. That's how our meals are set up. And with that, if we save this and we have a look at a recipe here, we see our ingredients. Now for the styling, we can certainly do something there, and I will do so in a second. But before I do that, let me repeat this for the steps here. Replace this text with selected meal.steps, and then output each step here, which is also just a string, and which is also unique, in a text. With that added, we should also see the steps for our meal. Indeed we do. Now again, styling can be improved a little bit, and we'll do just that. And I think it makes sense to create a separate component or a render function for this. And I will create a separate component. We'll store it in the same file though, because we really only use it in that file, but you could also create a new file, totally up to you. There I'll have my list item, which receives props, where I return. And now here I want to use a view, which I'm importing as a wrapper, so that I can style this container, and in there have my text where I output props children. And now that view here will get a style from styles.listItem maybe, so that we can style this nicely. And here, of course, I don't want to use text, but actually default text. Also here, of course, so that we take advantage of our own custom text. Now for the list item style here, let's go down to the style sheet and add list item. And each list item should have some margin, a vertical margin of, let's say, 10, and a horizontal margin of, let's say, 20, so more spacing to left and right. And let's also maybe add a border color of a light grayish color here with hashtag CCC and a border width of 1. We'll see how that looks like. And then also add a little bit of padding in there, 10 in all directions. And we'll see how that looks like. Now we just need to make sure we use our list item component, and we use it by returning that instead of text here when outputting the ingredients. We still pass ingredient between the opening and closing tags of our own custom component, because there we're using props children that does use the content which we pass between opening and closing tags. And we do the same for our steps. With that, let's have a look at this. Yeah, doesn't look too bad. Got our steps here, got our ingredients. Of course, you can refine this styling, fine-tune it to your requirements, to the way you want it to look, but I'm actually quite happy with that. And with that, we got a basic detail screen. And of course, this detail screen also works for our favorites because we're using one and the same screen there. So that looks quite nice. The filter screen is what's now missing.